Welcome to Conversation with Tony Mobley. On Conversation with Tony Mobley, I'm having a conversation with Mr. Alexander Knight. This is episode 10 of 2024 of Conversation with Tony Mobley, and we are back. Yes, we're back. Thanks to everyone for being a part of this new journey powered by Mimo Live. We also want to thank everyone who was a part of the old infrastructure. I want to thank the team behind Conversation with Tony Mobley for all of your hard work. We have, with the courtesy of Alex Lindsay and 090, we have what we call the Mukana question system. And with that question system, you can ask questions. And not only can you ask questions, but those questions can be voted up and down. That's right. So if you want to make sure that your question gets priority for our conversation today with Alexander Knight, then you want to go in, put the question in, and then vote for it. Vote for it to be up or vote for it to be down. And so we want to thank you for this opportunity. So we're going to get right to it. And so our very first question is, who is Alexander Knight? Thank you so much for being here with me today. And we're looking forward to this conversation that we're going to have. So thank you, sir, for being here.
Oh, you're most welcome, Tony. I always love talking to you, and I appreciate the invitation being on the show.
All right. So the very first question is, who is Alexander Knight?
Yeah, who am I? Well, I wear many hats, but I would primarily say that I am a a passionate technology person. Been working with computers ever since I was a little kid. I don't know how far back you want to go, Tony, but I started tinkering with computers at a very young age. Sometimes successfully put them back together, not so successfully other times, which didn't make my dad too happy. But we always had a computer in the house at a young age. That's I would primarily describe myself as a technology enthusiast. As far as my hobbies and my traits are concerned, guitar player, musician, been playing guitar since I was 13 years old. What I do for a living, my day job, I actually work for a company called Long McQuaid. We're the biggest music retailer in Canada. My job is I run a very busy PA rental department. So our team basically does rentals on a daily basis, and so that keeps me busy. And then my side hustle is podcasts. I've been podcasting for the better half of 15 years. Some of them made money, and most of them didn't make money. As you know, it's always a grind with podcasts and content creation, but I've been doing that for a very long time as well.
That's very great. Thank you so much for sharing that. Our next question is, how has your family contributed to who you are right now?
Yeah, that's a big one. I've always been really close with my family. In fact, I have dinners on a regular weekly basis with my family, oftentimes with my sister and with my parents. And I grew up in a kind of a mixed household because my father was born in Athens, Greece, so he came from there. My mom's side of the family actually came from Spain, very hardworking, working class, middle class folk that came from Spain, and they actually initially landed in Brazil. My grandfather was a really skilled carpenter, and he was always good at repairing stuff. He had a very successful furniture making business in Brazil, and then he sold it and they moved to Canada. My mom grew up, both her and her sister grew up in Montreal, and then found their way over to the West Coast eventually, where they settled. So I have a bit of a mixed heritage, always exposed to great food. But my parents influenced me a lot. I would say they both had very different backgrounds, but a lot of what I would call my work ethic, my constant need to learn new things and never rest on my laurels definitely comes from my parents. They were always really hardworking people, and they instilled those values in me at a very, very young age. So I never stopped learning, Tony. As you know, with technology, things are always evolving at an incredibly rapid pace, now more so than ever. And you can't get lazy in this industry. Even just with technology in my day job, and even on office hours, the other show that I'm on, I'm always learning from other people, and I'm always researching new things. So I find that this is it's just part of who I am. Even when I would do volunteer work at a young age and people weren't paying me for work, I always took pride in doing a good job, even if it was just washing dishes. And I feel like that's somewhat lost these days. It's really hard to find good people that have good work ethic. I find it's, there's certain things you can train people on. I can train somebody to learn how to do audio work and audio production stuff, but there's certain the soft skills, as we call them. That's really hard. I feel like that you're taught that at a young age, and you're exposed to people around you, and you pick that up very quickly as a young impressionable kid. So that's a big part of my upbringing.
That's very cool. So I'm curious, what is the hot ticket at your store? What are people coming in and wanting to buy?
Well, I mean, for what I do, because I have two departments to deal with. So I do recording and PA. So a lot of my time is spent just renting equipment to people. But a lot of the people that come in to record, it's a wide variety of people. We have people that come in that know absolutely nothing. That's a good chunk of our business, is helping people that don't really know much about audio. So we have these, people that are just learning how to do recording. They're maybe curious about it. And they're all sorts of ages, but basically they're coming in. They don't know anything about microphones, so they need our guidance to get a decent setup. So, but it runs the gamut of those people all the way up to really, really experienced mixing and mastering engineers. I have some well-known people that come into the store that have been in the business for 20, 30 years, and so they're buying really high end gear. So we support all of that, and we're there to try to be knowledgeable and help people with no matter what budget that they have. And as far as rentals are concerned, it's kind of interesting. I don't really talk about my day job that often, so a lot of people don't even know where I work, and where it's kind of interesting at our company, because the gear that we rent, for the most part, especially speakers, is actually stuff that we actually manufacture. So we have a company called Yorkville Sound. Has been in business for many, many, many decades. You probably know it more in Canada, but we sell and distribute our products all over the world, in Europe and the United States. So very unique business model. A lot of rental houses tend to rent other products, and they don't do it on the kind of scale that we do. So we manufacture a lot of our products and rent it. So it's a very interesting business model, and it's a good chunk of our business is rentals.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. Um, I'm gonna put you on the spot from this point of view. Tell me a good microphone for a regular consumer.
Well, I would start by asking you what you're primarily going to be using it for. So, whether you're a vocalist, you're interested in singing, or if you're a podcaster, those are going to be two different recommendations. If I'll give you a couple recommendations here. So,
Okay.
if you're just starting out and you want to record in the bedroom, and you're a vocalist, or maybe you want to record a guitar, and let's say your budget is under $200, I'll get very specific here. Right now, my current favorite budget condenser microphone for a home studio setup is a Lewitt LCT 240. It's a very good sounding condenser microphone that I find works well on human voice, male, female. It's very versatile, works great on acoustic instruments. You can put it on a guitar amp, you can put it on a lot of different percussion instruments, and it sounds really good. So that's a really good microphone for podcasters. Again, depending on the budget, the Shure MV7 is a very popular microphone that I recommend as a hybrid microphone that works as a USB and XLR analog microphone. So that's great for somebody that's just starting out, that wants a really good broadcast ready sound, but they don't want to spend, say, $500 or more on a setup, and they can just plug their headphones into that mic and they got really good sound.
Fantastic. So so MV7 would be middle of the road, someone who has some experience with podcasting. What about
Yeah.
somebody that really has no budget issues? What would you recommend?
Those are my favorite kind of people, Tony. Yeah, so there's a bunch. Currently, I have a couple of common ones that I use, but I'm a big fan of Electro Voice microphones. I've got a bunch in my studio that you can't see right now, but the RE20 and the RE27, those are two classic broadcast microphones that you see in radio stations. They've been around since the late 60s. I think the RE20 first came out, I want to say 1967. So it's been around, it's been a staple for a very long time. It has a very specific sound, and it's in a similar price point to the Shure SM7B, which, once again, a very popular studio microphone. that has become a very popular broadcast microphone. Also, a lot of podcasters have made that microphone very, very popular. So the Electro Voice family of microphones and the Shure microphones are two very popular ones.
Okay. So now the question is, what do people need to know about you that they don't know? What do they need to know that they don't
Well, I don't know if they need to know it, but I think there's not a lot of on some of the shows that I'm on. Well, if you watch The Last Angry DJ, which is one of the podcasts that I do, I think a little bit of my personality comes out on that show, but maybe not as much on certain other shows. So I would say that people that don't work with me directly or don't hang out with me on a regular basis probably don't realize how much of a sense of humor that I have. And so I'm often sarcastic. I have a bit of a dark sense of humor, and I try to inject a bit of personality in everything that I do. It's hard as somebody who's in management too. I find that it's always a challenge to strike a balance between, uh, you know, setting a kind of example of how a manager should look and behave, but still kind of making it light and a fun place to be. I mean, the reality is, you know, when you go to work, you oftentimes spend more time with these coworkers than you do with your own family. So it's not, I kind of want to cultivate a place that is fun to be, that people look forward to be in. And I wasn't always very good at that. It took me quite a few years to sort of figure out how to strike that balance. And I feel like I'm, always kind of tweaking and working on things. But I definitely think it's my sense of personality, my sense of humor that doesn't always come through on the shows that I do.
well, you brought up The Last Angry DJ, so let's go ahead and talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So The Last Angry DJ is a show that I do every week with my co-host Mitchell Hill, who for many years was on Office Hours, was a great reader. Actually, I really look up to him because Mitchell's a very experienced broadcaster, had a very successful career in the 70s and 80s, and he had this idea about doing a show called The Last Angry DJ to sort of not necessarily kind of try to relive the old glory days, but I thought it was a kind of interesting idea because there's such a big age gap between the two of us. So the main concept of the show, for those who haven't seen it, is that we kind of bridge the gap between the old world of what I call old media and new media. So terrestrial radio versus say podcast, or I'll lump YouTube in there as well. So that's kind of the concept, is we talk about those two very different mediums and how they are evolving and how where they came from and how they need to change over time. Because look, not just terrestrial radio, but certainly podcasts have had their own problems. And podcasting is a much newer medium, but it's going through some growing pains. You hear about this all the time with a lot of people that have been doing it for a very long time, where the ad revenue may, not is not necessarily where it used to be. So I think it's always a very interesting conversation to see how technology helps us kind of evolve this stuff, and how do we make this stuff stay relevant? Because I mean, certainly broadcast has had a lot of challenges over the years, and continues to do so. I mean, people are losing their jobs in the broadcast industry all the time, and it's really, really sad. But it's they have a lot of challenges to work through.
Well, I just want to tell you that I had a chance to listen to an episode today, and you guys, your voices are amazing. Both of you are, coming from different points of view, but
Sure,
it's amazing just to listen to you guys talk, and then the
I
content
appreciate
of
that.
what you guys are talking about is great. And I text Mitchell today. I said I didn't even know until today about the podcast. So
Oh, great.
I'm glad I got to find out about it, and I'm glad I got a chance to listen to it. I was really amazed at and I'm going to tell Mitchell that when the next time I see him, or maybe even when I text him, next time I text him, I'm going to say, man, you are really utilizing that gift that you have, that voice. He sounds amazing
He does,
in
yeah.
in the conversation that you guys are, and
Yeah, I
yeah,
really
go ahead.
appreciate you mentioning that. Yeah, it's funny because I sometimes I'll look at the because of course I produce the show, so I have to edit this stuff and review the footage, and I listen to the conversations that we have, and I kind of think of like, how do other people perceive the two of us? Because it seems like such a weird thing to again, because there's the huge age gap, and how many shows do you see someone in their early 40s and someone in their 60s do a show together? But I get along with him, and I consider Mitch a friend, and we gelled right away. And Tony, kind of like it, I don't know about you, but for me, when I meet somebody new, I can tell fairly quickly whether or not I'm going to sort of gel with their personality. And he was one of those people where I just kind of got him right away, and we became fast friends. So I'm really having a lot of fun on that show, and I'm glad you're having a fun time listening to it.
Yes, it's amazing. I after I listened to it, I couldn't help but reflect on the old days when I grew up in New Jersey, and you know, the main station that I listened to was WBLS in New York City, and I could hear I don't know who the announcer was, but he would always get on and WBLS. And I was hearing when I was hearing Mitchell today, I was reflecting on all of that. So it was just amazing to hear
Some
you
people just
guys.
they're born with. I think you do have to work on it. It's your voice is like a muscle, but there's a bit of a gift there with people like with Mitch, with
Absolutely.
certain people, right? And not everyone can do a good job of that. And this is a recurring conversation we have on this podcast. I always bring up is where are the big voices? You don't hear a lot. And I went to broadcast school, okay, for 2 years, and they actually actively discourage people now to kind of put on a voice like this. And things have changed even in the schooling now, where they just want people to talk naturally. But I still feel like you got to work at that voice, because even if you're talking naturally, there's still certain things you need to work on, because it's a muscle. You got to exercise it. And just from hearing a lot of my classmates, I kind of cringed at some people's voices because, and they didn't, that's another thing, they didn't take criticism very well. I feel like there's a whole new generation of people that, again, going back to what I said at the top of the hour about my work ethic, you have to also be able to take criticism well, and, realize that people are telling you this thing when they come from experience. When somebody's been in the industry for a long time is giving you constructive criticism, it's for a reason, right? And unfortunately, a lot of people, they just can't take it. They cannot take it.
That's interesting. And that also brings us to our next question, where the question is, let's talk about your education and training.
Yeah, so audio has been a passion of mine. I went to school. Oh, this is a long time ago. 2000 was when I graduated high school, which is in the year, I'm 42 now, so I graduated in the year 2000. I went uh, to audio engineering school, and I did those classes, but I ended up not completing. There was a 5 level program. I never completed the last one. I was I was never a particularly good student. I would say I I was never diagnosed, put it this way, with ADD, but I always had a problem concentrating in classes. And I find that a lot of the information in that class, while I enjoyed it, I didn't really retain a lot of that information in audio engineering school. And I found that all of the skills that I have now were built up from just me going ahead and doing the actual work. And I've always been the kind of learner that learned better just by looking at what other people were doing and asking a lot of questions and just going and doing it. And that's also why I used to get involved with building computers all the time, because I love tinkering, seeing what works, breaking things, learning from those mistakes. And that's what I did with audio, was just learn live sound from other people. I would, shadow other people, and I would go and do it myself. And a lot of times, you spectacularly fail and you do a bad job of it for a long time when you're first starting to do it, because you don't really have a lot of formal training. But I learned pretty quick. But I just love doing stuff like just throwing myself in the fire and just picking stuff apart and learning it. So that was my audio background, and I continue to learn things every single day. And not a lot of official training there in the audio realm. And then, of course, broadcast school. I did that for 2 years. I did graduate, and I should say, actually, I went back to school very late in life. I worked in the tech industry for the better part of my 20s into my 30s, and had a good successful career, I guess you could call it, kind of going up the corporate ladder. But I quickly got burnt out. I worked as a product manager for quite a few years in software development. So I know I can kind of speak. I never coded, but I could speak that language. I was always curious about that kind of stuff. Hacked away at HTML and CSS myself for a little bit, but I could always speak the language with software developers. But I got burnt out for a while, and after I got laid off in 2000, I think it was 2014. It was a confluence of the right timing, and unfortunately, in a sad way, my grandmother had passed away, but she left me a really sizable inheritance. And so I decided to do something fairly responsible with that money, and I went back to school full time. And I was 30. I'm 42 now. I believe I was 36 years old. Pretty risky for me to go back to school, take a loan out, and some of that money I ended up buying my first home. So I was very thankful that I had this inheritance. I was able to buy a home in a market where, without that, I had no savings at the time. I couldn't afford to buy a place. So thanks to my grandmother for her good fiscal planning there, and both my grandparents, of course. But yeah, I went to school for 2 years, and I did that full time, and I graduated from the broadcast program at BCIT, which is a well-renowned technical school in British Columbia, Canada here. And I enjoyed my time, and I learned a lot. But I decided very quickly after I graduated that I wasn't going to go into radio, and the reason was because it just didn't pay well. I mean, I just and I probably should have done more research at the time, but it didn't pay very well. And I realized this was a younger man's game of moving around a lot, moving from city to city, working in small radio stations, making minimum wage, which I couldn't afford to do. So I ended up getting another job, and now I'm managing that rental department. So I'm making more doing that than I would have, working in radio, and I've got side hustles and all of that. So I'm pretty busy 7 days a week, whether it's balancing a full-time 40-hour work week at a salaried position, or just producing podcasts for people. So that keeps me pretty busy.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that. So let's talk about, well, before we go to our next question, do you feel like maybe giving us a little selection of a little something right now on your guitar?
Yeah, I guess I could do that. I mean, no, I'm not going to play a whole song, but I'm kind of working on this riff. So it's like a cooking show. I just so happen to have a guitar perfectly prepped and ready to go right here. I'm just going to mute my mic here and play it just a little bit of this riff. That's just a little bit.
Fantastic, fantastic. I was looking at your on-air meters going as you were playing behind you, and it was
Going
great. It
crazy.
was great. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Um, our next question is, how is volunteering in the office hours community?
Oh man, that's been pivotal. Pivotal, actually. Before I even joined the show, I was a fan. I watched that show for I think a couple of years, like right almost from the beginning. Not quite, but I watched it for a while. And it's interesting. Before office hours, like I mentioned, my audio background. I've been doing audio production for 25 years or so. But I didn't really know much about cameras and never got into production work. And I remember when I first started experimenting with video for video podcasts, I was just using webcams, Logitech C920s, all that kind of stuff. Nothing crazy. But as I started watching Office Hours, it really inspired me that I'm getting left behind. I need to learn more about video production. So, I started buying cameras, and it's crazy. Over the last 3 years, my camera setup has changed. I think I've gone through 2 or 3 different cameras over the show, and I've gone through different lenses. My lighting has evolved. So it's been pivotal for me to really learn a skill set that I didn't have before, getting out of my comfort zone. Before Office Hours, I couldn't tell you what an aperture was, couldn't tell you what ISO was. I didn't know how to do white balance or didn't know how to do lighting properly. So I've really learned that over the years from other people on the show that are, much more experienced and smarter than me in that area. And it's been amazing. And I've built up certain skills now where I've built up this great home studio now where, it's complete turnkey studio. I flip a couple switches, the lights, all the studio lights come on, everything's DMX'd, and got microphones set up here, and I've got people coming in here every week to record podcasts. And I couldn't have done it without Office Hours. I didn't know how to use a camera switcher before Office Hours. So it's just been a wealth of knowledge. Hasn't been very good on my wallet, though. I will say my wallet is a lot lighter, and you probably know
expensive
when
friends.
you got expensive friends on that show. But it's really a think tank. It is really a think tank, and I answer questions on the show, but I'm really there to learn from others that are more experienced than me, and it's super valuable. I can't tell you enough how much I cherish the community. I've made friends. I wouldn't have the Last Angry DJ podcast if it weren't for meeting people on Office Hours. So I'm eternally thankful to everybody at that show.
I am too. And it's amazing. One of the things I was thinking, what camera did you start with, and what camera are you using right now?
Yeah, so before I started Office Hours, I was just using Logitech cameras, but I realized if I'm going to be on the show, I better come on to the show with something better than a webcam. So I ended up getting I believe it was a Panasonic FZ300, which has got a tiny sensor. I think it's like a half inch sensor. But that was like my first real camera that had a powered zoom lens on it. So I came onto the show with that. Then I switched to a Panasonic Lumix G7. Then I switched to a GH5, which had a slightly better sensor with a little bit better autofocus, which is what I'm on now. So I'm on a GH5, which again is a micro four thirds camera. There are people on the show that have a much better camera than, I'd love to have an FX30. That's my next goal. But yeah, I'm on a micro four thirds camera, and this is how my frame looks like. But as you know, Tony, a lot of that stuff has to do with not just the camera, but how you choose to light your background. And I've really come to appreciate dressing a set properly. This is going to sound weird, but I get so much enjoyment from walking into IKEA and looking at the showrooms, and they give me design. I know it sounds silly, but I love looking at all of their different setups because that really, like, I've got a fake IKEA plant back there. And so I just love putting little things behind me to kind of give it a bit of personality and just, make it not so boring with just like a plain wall.
Absolutely. And so I'm going to tell you, you came in better than I did the first time. I came in on a 2012 MacBook Pro using the camera lens that's built in.
Well,
And
I mean,
man, I had sunlight coming in. It was
yeah.
it's awful.
Well,
I mean,
we
it
all
was
got to
bad.
learn sometime, and
It was
you've
bad.
evolved a lot. Your whole setup has evolved an incredible amount as well. But that's why we do it, right?
Yes, yes, indeed. And so I'm so thankful to be in the place that I'm in now. And not only has Office Hours helped me, but it's helped a church that I'm involved with, and they've been doing they've been doing Zoom worship services since the pandemic began, and we are now in a position where they're going to be building a building, so we're going to have the groundbreaking on November 1st, And this
Congratulations.
is also the 42nd anniversary and pastor appreciation of the church as well. And so all of that's coming together. But this, and I get tapped when I say small church, but this small church in Macon, Georgia, does has had great benefits from the office hours community in that they have people that are using the aftershock microphones, and we are on YouTube, and we have a brand YouTube account, and we are doing all of these amazing things, and we have people coming in from all over the world and all over the United States that are participating in the worship service, and we're using Zoom tools in our worship experience, and we're using whiteboards, and we're using breakout rooms for Bible study and conversation and all these great
So
things. And
in other
it's,
words, your phone hasn't stopped ringing since you joined the show.
no, it hasn't. And embraced the office hours community. And I'm so excited about the things that, because we're actually now um, contemplating. Well, I shouldn't say contemplating because they have already told me that they want to do hybrid worship service. So once the sanctuary is built, they want to continue streaming YouTube worship services. So we're looking forward to all of that taking place. And so I'm going to be reaching out to you and all other office hour members because we're going to need speakers and microphones, and we're going to need the integration of how we can remote control everything. And
Yeah,
so we're going to have conversations like we did today
please do.
about
I'd love to talk to you
vmix and
about that.
all kinds of things. So
Any way I
all
can
of
help.
that's coming up. Yeah. So um, I feel you, brother, when you talk about the things that you're learning and continuing to learn in office hours community. Our next question is, have you embraced any AI applications?
Yes, 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 I have. I feel like I was a bit kicking and screaming at the beginning because, moral panic sets in. The computer, the AI is going to take over. Everyone's going to lose their jobs, and sure, that I'm sure that's probably happening somewhat now. But I'm finding that I'm using them to the extent where I feel that they are improving my productivity and efficiency. And those are two key areas for me. Balancing multiple jobs. I don't have a lot of free time. And so anything that can help reduce that friction can definitely help. Tools like transcription tools like Mac Whisper that can help me transcribe a podcast to make something that's text that somebody can read is incredibly valuable. I've played with tools like Opus Pro for creating short content. Didn't really like it at first. Stopped using it for a while because it's still not as good as I am as a human editor. But it's come a long way, and I periodically check back on it because it's again, this stuff is developing at such a rapid pace that 3 months is an eternity in this world. I mean, it could be
Yes, it
you
is.
almost don't even recognize these services when you use them. When 3 months go by and you haven't used them. So it's just really incredible to watch this stuff. I started playing around with Notebook LM, the service that can, you can upload a file and it'll create an audio podcast. I'm not sure I see a lot of value in it, but it's kind of impressive how good the voices sound. In fact, one specific area dawned on me where I think it could be very useful as an education. I uploaded a PDF of a manual, a very technical manual, which of course to most people it's going to be very boring. But it was kind of fascinating to hear two people have this casual, fun conversation about this really complex technical manual where I was just thinking, I bet you in school one day, like my nephews could use something like this where they can just upload a textbook and it'll just give them this fun conversation and it will explain complex things so that they don't have to read this kind of boring technical book, right? So I see the value of it. I don't know if a lot of this technology is really going to pan out. And the problem is a lot of this stuff is not really making money, and that's a whole nother conversation we probably don't have time for. But the business model, I think a lot of that stuff, some of this stuff is going to stick around. A lot of it's probably not. So it kind of remains to be seen where a lot of this technology will land and what's going to stick with people.
Have you played with any music creation AI?
No, that's I'm particularly sensitive about that area. Uh, there's one. No, who was it? Was Suno. Okay, I will say it wasn't me. I used it to test it out on behalf of my dad because my dad had something silly that he wanted to accomplish. He has a group of guys that he golfs with, and he wanted to create this. He wanted to use or find an AI service that could generate a song that sounded like Isaac Hayes' song Shaft, but he wanted it to be about a guy named Jeff that plays golf. Like super silly use, right? But it worked pretty well at creating a fun, like
Okay.
sort of 70s funk song. But as a musician, as someone who writes music, not a whole lot these days because I'm very busy. I'm particularly sensitive about this kind of stuff, writing music for people. I think it's pretty far away. I don't think it's writing anything that's super fantastic. That's going to blow people's minds away on the level of, say, the Beatles or something classic like that. But never say never with this technology because 20 years from now, 30 years, a lot can change. So who knows what's going to happen.
Absolutely. We have a question from Dr. Chris Clark of Tempe, Arizona. Alexander, what have you learned and gained from your participation in office hours?
Oh, there's a lot that I've learned. Definitely. Started originally on that show just being, I would say the first month at least, I didn't really say a lot on that show because I typically, when I get involved in something new, especially like somebody else's show, I just kind of wanted to read the room to really learn what's the vibe of the show. How does the show work? What things work, what things don't work, and so I didn't really say whole lot. But as I started to gain a little bit more confidence in that area and answer questions and explore other roles like being question reader and then eventually landing on hosting the show, it really helped me build on my existing communication skills, and that's one area where I feel like I've always felt that my communication skills were reasonably strong, but there are always areas for improvement, and I think especially when it comes to hosting that show, being able to work to a timer. It's very much like radio, the way it's structured. And actually, that's one of the things I didn't like about radio is that, like, I don't want to work to somebody else's clock. I want to talk for as long as I want, and hit the button when I'm good and ready to finish. But it's really taken me again going back to getting out of your comfort zone, learning something new. It's really helped me get out of that comfort zone and build on skills that I didn't have. So I'm grateful for it. And I'm still learning. I'm still making mistakes, trying to be as good of a host as I can. So just keep showing up every week. Again, just iterating, trying to get better every time.
So you've become the regular host on Saturday?
I've started hosting every week reliably. I don't know how many, I've lost control or lost track of how many weeks I've done this now. But yeah, I would say probably for the better part of the last month, maybe a little bit longer. Again, I've lost track, but I've started hosting pretty regularly on Saturdays now, and I'm trying out hosting Office Hours Global on the first hour of Wednesdays for Audio Wednesday, which I really like because again, that's my forte is the audio stuff. So I can answer a lot of audio related questions on Wednesdays.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for that. Um, Thank you, Dr. Clark, for that question. Um, Please give us an overview of your professional work.
An overview of my professional work. Okay. I'm not sure what respect. I mean, how I operate, perhaps. I mean, I
Well,
do. Yeah, go ahead.
let's let's talk about you've talked about your day job pretty much.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit more about your podcasting, hosting, and work that you're doing for your clients and that kind of thing.
Sure.
You said you're doing recording actually in your studio. I'd like to
Yeah,
hear more.
I've got people that come in here every week. So I've got again, like I said, it's kind of a side hustle. So obviously I have my own show, but then I have right now I actually only have one client because I'm stretched pretty thin between the amount of hours that I have every week. But I've got one client, and I've been working with him for the last 3 years consistently, and we've done almost 100 episodes now together. And initially, I think he did 12 episodes, and I came in on episode 13. And mainly, he was looking for someone to do the whole production because he didn't really know that much about how to do that work. And funny enough, actually, he was a customer of mine. I sold him a
Oh,
bunch of
wow.
microphones,
Okay.
and he's like, listen, I don't know how to work any of this stuff. I don't understand Zoom properly. I'm doing this stuff in my mom's living room, and it looks horrible, and I don't know how to do lighting. So I was like, look, I think I can help you out. And it's really amazing to see the last 3 years of his show, because his show, if you look at the first episode I worked on and the most recent one, it really lines up with when I started working on office hours, and you can see the massive change in quality over the years because I've upgraded the studio multiple times. I've changed the cameras like 3 different times and changed the lighting and done this and that. And so it's really evolved over the time. But yeah, I have a home studio where people come into and record this podcast, and he brings guests. And so I produce his whole show top to bottom. It's not just cutting the show, but editing it and doing all the short form content clips that he wants for Instagram and for TikTok. And he wants this stuff on a, he wants content all the time, almost every day of the week. So it's a lot of work to put that stuff together. So again, it's a grind. It's a lot of work to keep the content flowing on social media.
I understand. I understand.
And
I
it's
understand.
another thing too. I just want to touch on this one thing, because people ask me about this all the time about starting a podcast and trying to understand what it takes. And I don't want to discourage people, but I try to tell people, look, don't expect to make any money. Go into it because you think you have something to say that you're passionate about, and it's a grind. And be prepared. Treat it like a job. Do it consistently, and do it really hard for a long time. I was never a morning person, but office hours turned me into a morning person. And so I wake up typically 4:35 a.m. And like I said, everybody knows now I've got a full-time job. But before I even go to my full-time job, at 5 a.m., I'm editing video. And I'm doing that 7 days a week. And then I go to a job. I do that job for 8 hours, and then I'm absolutely exhausted. And I come home and I can't do anything else. So I do that 7 days a week. Maybe that's not the healthiest thing, but it's really helped me not only build on my existing skill sets and learn new things, but I've been able to help other people as well. And you know what? Maybe one day it'll turn into a full-time job where I can quit my salary position and just do this full time. I mean, that's ultimately the goal.
Well, I want to say again, thank you for being with me today, and I also want to thank your managers and all of the staff that allowed you to be present for us, our conversation today. Again, I want to say thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I've got a great boss. He's very flexible. So
I hope he's watching. Um, we have another question from Dr. Chris Clark, and he says, Alexander, your approach to professional learning sounds like self-directed project-based learning. Do you see it that way?
100%. I'm not shy about reading, about learning new things. I spend a lot of time every week going on YouTube. I've built a network through the fine people at Office Hours Global and other people in the community, locally in the community that I've reached out to. And, I've had my share of mentors over the years, and I absolutely do see it as project-based, self-directed learning. I always pick up a book. Always, I'm never afraid to read a manual and just try to figure stuff out. I in many ways I still feel like I'm a bit of that kid that had the Lego blocks that would just like build stuff and just try to use some creativity, and then break stuff and figure out what works and what doesn't work. And I'm still doing that. Uh, I don't mind making mistakes as long as I try to learn from them fairly quickly. I will say this about self-directed learning. I haven't always been very good about um, like the way I treat myself. I'm very self-critical, and I've tried to be better over the years. I'm still learning how to be a little more gentle with myself because anytime any little thing goes wrong, shouldn't have done it that way. Should have done this. Should have done that. And I get into my own head a lot. And maybe some people, maybe that resonates with some people here, but that's always been my personality. And it's always a work in progress. I'm not always very good at it, but thankfully I have some, good friends that I reach out to that have helped me through some of that and have tried to help me change my thinking. And that's okay to make those mistakes, and as long as you learn from them and just pick up where you left off and just keep going, right? Because that's the only way to do it.
I think all of us are, in that same mode in terms of looking at things in terms of mistakes that we make and want to get better. And, I'm constantly looking at this setup and, I'm not satisfied. I think I sound pretty good. I think I look pretty good, but there's still, it's still for me things that can be improved and things that, I could look a little bit better, or I could sound a little bit better, or I could, or be able to bring
For
in more
sure.
things. And then the other part of it that I have to wrestle with is that I have to make sure that in terms of working with the church, that I'm not, going too far where there's not an opportunity for them to, I need to bridge the gap in a way so that, I'm not so far out there that, well, that's too much. I don't want to do that. You know, that's too much.
Yeah, I hear you.
But,
But
at
I
the
think
same
that's okay,
time,
Tony. Like I think it's, being constantly striving for better. I think, I know for me, I don't want to speak for anyone else, but the moment I stop trying to do better at anything, any of the endeavors, whether it's uh, figuring out better, more ways to make my department more profitable, or providing more value to my clients, or just being a better host on office hours and figuring out how do I serve the community, how do I serve other people? Because to me, that's what it really comes down to. But I think the moment I stop doing that means I probably stopped caring, and I should probably just hang up my coat and say this is not for me anymore, because I think that's just it's dangerous. And I see that with some of the people, unfortunately, over the jobs, the various careers I've had. you know we can probably all identify with people, coworkers that we've had, where it looks like they're not happy at their job, and you wonder why do they even, they're just there to collect a paycheck. And I don't ever want to be that person that just shows up to collect a paycheck, because that's just no fun. Life's too short. I want to whatever job I'm doing, I want it to be something that I can just get up every morning and be enthused to go to work and do it.
and I kind of look at it like this too, we, at least in my case, I profess to be a Christian. And, if I'm doing something and I'm calling myself representing God, then I want to put forth the best effort that I can. And why would I not want to do that? If I
100%.
claim to be something and I want to represent that, I'm hearing Alex Lindsay in my ear. He's saying, put on that good suit and sound good and look good and have your shoes shining when you go when you go in for the interview. And and I feel like every time we're having a worship service, that's the way we ought to be thinking about it, that we're coming in and we're putting forth our best self because of whom we claim to represent. And so that's important to me, and that's part of the reason why I push myself and I push those that I work with, because in the back of my mind and in the front of my mind, I want to say that it's important that you, about what you're saying, that you are also, you don't have many opportunities to make first, second, and third impressions. Most of the time, it's that first impression. And so if you are haphazardly presenting yourself, then people's perception might be that you're haphazard or that you're lazy or that you're something. And
Yeah.
so, I'm always wanting to push the envelope because of what I believe and how strong I believe it. And I didn't mean to get into all of that, but
No,
that's
that's
kind of
okay. I That
that's
resonates
kind of
with
where.
me too. That really resonates with me because I'm always amazed, as someone who's done hiring. I've interviewed a lot of people. I've had to fire people in the past, which is never fun. And I see a huge variety of different ways that people work. And again, I talked about work ethic, and I'm always shocked at how a lot of people present themselves without singling out any one company I've worked at. But you always see people that just, it's like, really, this is how you're presenting yourself, like this kind of like mediocrity, striving for just kind of just going through the motions. I don't understand where that comes from, because I'm sure I've done jobs that I didn't particularly enjoy, but I didn't do them for very long and didn't couldn't tolerate them for very long, and I found jobs that better suited me. So I mean, I think the whole world would be a lot better place if people had better work ethic, and based on what you just said there, Tony, if people had that in mind and just try to present themselves in the best possible way, because you are absolutely right, you don't really get a lot of second chances or even third chances to make a good impression on somebody, so why not just do it right the first time?
And then, I'm hearing my mother, as you were talking, I'm hearing my mother, whatever you do it the best you can. Be the best you can. I'm hearing her say that, and, there were seven of us, and we all got that same message
Yeah,
that be the best, do the best, whatever the job is. If it's sweeping, be the best sweeper. Whatever you do it to the best you can. So
absolutely. And and that is actually, for me, even in jobs where I was doing something, either volunteer work or wasn't paid very much, or maybe I wasn't super happy in that job. I will say, for me, having showing up looking like I'm trying to do a good job and having a good work ethic, people take notice of that. And even when I left that those companies, I was always able to get a good referral, or somebody in that organization. Hey, I know John Smith at Acme Corporation. They're looking for someone, and I think that job might actually be good. I could introduce you, right? And so, but if I came into that job, if I didn't do a good job, or if I had a bad attitude and I looked like I didn't want to be there, I wouldn't have made that connection. I never would have
absolutely.
gotten that connection. And so it served me well to just try to do a good job as best as I could. By the way, I wanted to share one thing about this. Seems like such a small thing, and you asked me about my connection with my family, and sort of like how much my personality is a part of like how my upbringing. But one thing I always observed with my grandmother, who was an amazing cook. She's Spanish, and I noticed like she was always meticulous with not only cleaning her house, but I noticed when I would watch her, I spent a lot of time with my grandparents and watching her cook in the kitchen. And something as simple as never leaving dishes in the sink. The moment something was dirty, I would watch her wash it by hand, and she would tell me like, don't leave stuff piling up. And it seems like so small, but like now I find myself, without even really actively thinking about it, but I just like, oh, I use this pan. And so instead of just being lazy and leaving stuff stack up, I'm going to just wash it, and then I'll go about my day. So like, and I just like something simple like that I observed from my grandmother, it just stuck with me.
It's amazing that you were saying that my wife is having a conversation with someone, and she's talking real loud. But the funny thing is, she is exactly like your grandmother in terms of dishes in the sink.
That's funny.
Okay, um, we're down to our last two questions, but I want to see if you could give us some more music before we before we do these last two questions.
I could probably do that. Let's take a look. There you go.
Thank you so much, sir. Appreciate it. Thank you very, very much. And we're down to our last question. You're speaking to the world. What do you want the world to know?
Uh, I'll just echo some of the things that we talked about. I will say, just with anything you do, don't don't waste your time doing something that you're not happy with. There's only so much time that we have in this world, so just find something that you're passionate about, go and do it the best way that you possibly can, show up with a good attitude, and that's probably going to take you fairly far in life because you'll make a lot of
Absolutely.
connections that way.
Well, sir, I want to say thank you so much for being with me today. I really appreciate you being here with me today. And I appreciate you sacrificing. And I'm just going to be transparent and honest. I asked him for music at the last minute and he accommodated me. And I want to say thank you so much for doing that. I really appreciate it. We
That
want
was my
to
pleasure, Tony, and
go
thank you for
ahead.
inviting me on. This was fun.
Thank you again. I had a great time as well. I want to say thank you again for being here with me today. And we want to say to all those who are watching or will rewatch this on YouTube, you can watch other episodes of Conversation with Tony Mobley on the website as well as on YouTube. Conversation with Tony Mobley is produced by valued audio visual professionals who meet daily on Office Hours Global, hosted by Alex Lindsay. We want to say thank you, Mimo Live. We have great conversations with real people. Stay tuned for new episodes and great conversations on Conversation with Tony Mobley. We want to thank everyone for the 100 plus episodes of Conversation with Tony Mobley. When you have time, we ask that you go back and look at those 100 plus episodes of Conversation with Tony Mobley. And I think you will find something that you like and hopefully is helpful to you. Thank you, Alexander Knight, for being a part of our conversation today, for doing the work that you do, and for being the person who you are. We will have next week on Conversation with Tony Mobley, when we return, October 23rd, 2024, 8 p.m., with Mr. C.J. Cavell, who is also a Office Hours member who will be with us next week. Coming soon, more interesting conversations with real people, video producers, musicians, mental health experts, filmmakers, musicians, other creators. We have interesting conversation with interesting people. Conversation with Tony Mobley is on YouTube, and we engage with real people with real conversations. If you like, subscribe. You also can donate to Conversation with Tony Mobley on the Conversation with Tony Mobley website. We want to say thank you to everyone. Good night. God bless. Take care. See you soon.